me once again, our favorite recurring guest of the podcast, my favorite person to geek out on the great sport of trail and ultra running with, Corrine Malcolm joins us again. Corrine, say hello to the people.
Hi, so happy to be here. I was just texting Dylan like 5 minutes ago being like, hey, so I need a link for today. Come on, man.
So. I was upstairs making a hot beverage and leisurely making my way down to the Zoom platform to send a link to Corrine. Corrine, you are broadcasting from the great state of Washington. It is a cold day there. I'm at home in Portland, Oregon. The Pacific Northwest is experiencing a bit of a cold snap. We were supposed to drive down to San Francisco yesterday and got stymied by the road conditions on I-5. Headed home with our tail between our legs.
It's okay. My dad is, I'm sure, still sitting at SeaTac trying to fly back to the Midwest right now. So you're just one of many Washington, Oregon, Californians stranded on the Western seaboard during this very cold, wintry snap.
Yep. People live on the West Coast can be soft in dealing with the harsh weather conditions, but you and I are tougher than that. And here we are battling these treacherous conditions to record a podcast, a year-end podcast to talk about the year in trail and ultra running. And as I said, you're my favorite person to talk about this stuff with. We've had such a fun time this year, sort of having the opportunity to do a lot of fun commentary and analysis of the sport together. And so I figured it would be great to end the year as a team going over some of the major storylines. And I sort of just drew up a little outline for us where we're going to go through sort of the ultra runners of the year. You and I are both voters. Corrine, you are a new voter for ultra runner of the year. This is your first year on the panel. Any comments on that before we launch into our outline here?
Yeah, I don't know if I was an afterthought. Maybe someone bailed and I was listed in like the runners up, the waitlist category, but I got the email, I don't know, a week before the ballots were due saying, hey, do you have time to do this? And I said, yes, please. So it's been fun to dig around in the spreadsheet and remember performances that happened during this year, but seemingly a long, long time ago. And it was kind of cool to harken back to like Bandera of 2021, because that seems, I forgot that it took place despite it, being right around the corner again. So very, very cool to kind of dive back through some things and actually look at how like the year shook out, particularly from like a North American slanted, endurance performance. It was very cool. Very, very
such a good point too. Like as somebody who has been a voter for 3 or 4 years now, one of the things that I try and remind myself is to not have recency bias. It's so easy to forget races like Bandera and Black Canyon, Chuckanut, and Way Too Cool, even though those races didn't happen this year. But it's always important to, not only think about UTMB and Run Rabbit and Ultra Trail Cape Town, but instead keep the whole year in mind. So we're going to talk all about the ultra runners of the year on the men's and women's side. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the international runners of the year. And then, of course, performances of the year, FKTs, and some of the other interesting stories and predictions for the future. So, Corrine, why don't you get us started? Let's start with sort of ultra runners of the year, 2021. Let's start with the women, and I'll follow you up.
Yeah, you want to hear my 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, let's go 1, 2, 3, and then if there's any sort of honorable mentions, feel free to throw those out too.
Yeah, I thought that the women's field in general did a really good job of when evaluating like the women's performances and the men's performances this year. One thing that stood out to me was the fact that the women really had like a year-long resume, whereas I felt like a lot of guys had like a one-off performance that was incredibly good, but didn't have anything else to really kind of like compare apples to apples or apples to bananas or whatever's going on out there. So when you're going about trying to rank runners, it becomes a bit tricky and some biases are naturally going to slip in. So what I did, they looked at kind of each of their like pinnacle performances and then kind of went to like the next thing in line there. And if there was any weight that I could give there. So I went 1, Courtney Dauwalter, 2, Camille Herron, 3, Annie Hughes. And I think that Annie Hughes in third is probably what's going to swing people, but her Leadville performance followed up by watching her at Moab 240, which was, I'm biased probably because I saw her physically do the feat. Swung her over my 4 and 5, which were Sabrina Stanley and Addie Bracey.
It's a great ballot. I had Courtney Dauwalter and Camille Herron 1 and 2 also. Great minds think alike. Of course, Courtney Dauwalter smashing UTMB in the way that she did. I think that performance alone is worthy of Ultra Runner of the Year. But then, of course, being the champion that she is, she didn't stop there. She won Ultra Trail Cape Town. She won the San Juan Solstice, classic Colorado race in course record fashion, a few other local races. So even with a hard rock DNF, Courtney was at the top of my ballot. And then Camille, of course, at Javelina, probably the second best performance of the year, in my opinion, on the women's side. Absolutely insane victory there for her in course record in the desert on a course that really suits her. And then following it up at Desert Solstice with another American record. And then, yeah, the tough finish at Western States too is just like, can't help but respect that and factor that into my consideration for Camille Herron, who battled through a really tough race to finally get a finish at Western States after multiple DNFs there. I can't remember exactly how long it took her. Corrine, do you remember? It was like 28 or 29 hours.
It was like 28 hours. She took a long nap at the river is what happened there. And she got back up. I think she finished right before I came back into the booth to do golden hour stuff. So yeah, probably high 28,
29. Yeah. So really, really great season from Camille. And I'm actually having her on the podcast here soon. And it sounds like she's very focused on Western States for next year. And I think finally getting that finish under her belt there will set her up to finally race to her potential at Western States. I know we would all love to see that. And then my third person, instead of Annie Hughes, I put Brittany Peterson on my list. She, again, going back to having to use our memory a little bit as voters for Ultra Runner of the Year. Brittany Peterson, we will remember, had an amazing dominant performance at Black Canyon, winning there in February of this year, a gritty 4th place finish at Western States. I think you and I were both very impressed with her there, just battling through all day and following up a 2nd place finish with a 4th place finish. Really great run from Brittany there. And then finishing the year 2nd to Camille at Javelina. She did have a DNF at UTMB, but I felt that the combination of Black Canyon, Western States, and Javelina was enough to put Brittany Peterson in the top 3 for me in Ultra Runner of the Year.
She's well in my top 10, particularly harkening back to that Black Canyons performance and being the top American, remembering that this Ultra Runner of the Year is a North American, really very, very US centric ballot. And so being the top American at Western States definitely has a lot of sway. I feel like when it comes to lining up the performances against, where can we find head-to-head competition between these men and these women when it comes to to scoring the whole thing. So that was very impressive as well.
Yeah, no, great point. It was a Brit, a Kiwi, and a Spaniard, 1, 2, 3 on the women's race at Western States, with Brittany being the first American. Let's go to the men.
You're gonna make me go first again?
I can go first. So
there's a logical first, I would say, right?
Yeah, logical first, like Courtney Dauwalter, the male equivalent to Courtney Dauwalter, the great Jim Walmsley, again, Ultra Runner of the Year. I think this is year number 5. Why don't you look that up while I talk about it? I think this is 5 years in a row for Jim, which is
remembering that we didn't
insane.
Vote in 2020.
In 2020. So it's either 4 or 5, I think, for Jim Walmsley, if he does, in fact, retain his Ultra Runner of the Year placement. And I think it is pretty safe to assume that other voters would probably agree with us that is the case. So Jim Walmsley, just to recap his season, he nearly broke the 100K road world record at the Hoka Carbon X event that happened. I think it was in February of this year. Of course, he then won Western States in dominant fashion for the 3rd time in a row, winning by 80 minutes and running the 4th fastest time ever on the course in what was obviously historically tough conditions, and then finishing his season with a win at Ultra Trail Cape Town. So again, he DNF'd at UTMB. We're all still waiting for Jim to race to his potential at UTMB, and hopefully by sort of turning down his M1 bib at Western States next year, he'll finally line up in Chamonix and give that race his full attention. And then 2nd place, I had the great Portland resident Tyler Green in 2nd place on my ballot, who had an awesome, super consistent season. Very excited to see Tyler really coming into his own as an athlete, and hopefully getting the respect that he deserves from the voters. He got snubbed last year. We didn't even make the top 10. Was it last year or the year
2019?
Before? 2019. Thank you, Corrine. So Tyler Green was my second place male, and then Adam Peterman was third for me. So just to kind of recap that, did you have something similar? So I can
super similar.
Okay, well, then you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So once again, Jim in first for me, and then I had a little flip flop. I had Anthony Costales in second and Tyler Green in third, because although I found Tyler's performance at Western States incredible, I was really just very excited by Anthony Costales's kind of, he raced a little bit more, and not to say that more is better, right? But he performed well at Moab Red Hot 55K back in February of 2021, winning that, won Behind the Rocks Ultra 50 mile in Moab, Utah as well. In March of 2021, won Canyons in a really epic throwdown, being chased by the likes of Max King, and then his second place at Run Rabbit, I thought was an incredibly solid 100 mile. I think that's his first 100 mile.
Yep.
That's his debut 100 mile.
Because he didn't race Western States because he was injured.
Yep. So to have him come back from injury and put that together at the end of the season bumped him into number 2 on my list. But again, like 1, 2, 3 makes a lot of sense to me. And then as I got deeper into my top 10 that we submitted on our ballot, like things got a little bit weird, because I had to figure out, what is the body of work for each of these male athletes. So that was kind of Jim, Anthony Costales, and then Tyler Green in third was my top 3.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. The women's ballot I thought was much easier, or at least there was more to work with there than the men's ballot. And I definitely found at least the second 5 of the top 10 in the men's ballot to be kind of difficult to place in a way that I felt really confident about it, but I put a lot of thought into it. So I just want to kind of recap what I had said earlier. So Tyler Green was my second, winning at Black Canyon, second at Western States, a gritty, I think it was like 10th at TDS.
Hard race.
Yeah. He was third at the Tillamook Burn behind Mario Mendoza and Drew Holman. So even though it was a local race, it was still good competition. And so Tyler Green was second for me, and Adam Peterman, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes you just have to look at the specific performances. And so he only ran 2 ultras, but both of those ultras, Speed Goat 50K and JFK 50, he ran historically fast times. So he broke Jim Walmsley's course record at Speed Goat 50K, and then ran the second fastest time ever, missing Hayden Hawks's course record at JFK by only a couple of seconds. So Adam Peterman, I think, is a rising star, could be the next Jim Walmsley. And he ran a couple great sort of sub-ultra races. Of course, you can't factor that into the voting process, but he had a good race at the Pikes Peak Marathon, and then won the Trail Marathon Championships for the 3rd year in a row. So Adam Peterman, I think, is a rising star, deserving of recognition in this year's Ultra Runner of the Year ballot. But yeah, just those 2 ultras for me, because they were historically significant.
They were impressive.
He ran times commensurate with some of the best we've ever seen in the sport.
He was in my top 3. Adam Peterman made my top 5. And this is a good segue, I think, before we do International Runner of the Year, to do Rookie of the Year, maybe.
Okay, cool. Yeah, please.
And that is because Adam Peterman is my male Rookie of the Year for those exact reasons. Rookie of the Year being one where it's like generally their first significant season, or, even like their first real season. And I really struggled on the women's side with this, but for men, Adam Peterman was my clear Rookie of the Year. He's got some, sub ultra trail stuff in his background, but this was really his first year of ultra running, and to put together those performances, again, insanely fast Speed Goat 50K and insanely fast JFK taking the win there was just, I thought head and shoulders was like a very obvious pick for the male Rookie of the Year. And I want to find my female Rookie of the Year. And I struggled with the female Rookie of the Year. And I'll do this one too, and then you can tell me what yours are. I double dipped. I had Annie Hughes as my Rookie of the Year. She's got definitely more of an ultra history than Adam Peterman does. So it's kind of like, is she technically a rookie? But I think that this was very much in a way a breakout year for her. Youngest ever winner of Leadville 100. Insanely good performance at Moab 240, watching her run out of aid stations where everyone else is walking, like the top 5 men included in that, was very, very cool. I know that she has signed up for Cocodona this spring. So I'm a little bit terrified of Annie Hughes, and I'm excited to see, someone that young with that much grit and clear talent come into the sport as well.
Corrine, great minds think alike. We had the exact same rookies of the year. I had Adam Peterman on my podcast like 2 weeks ago, and I titled the podcast Rookie of the Year. Obviously no brainer, as you just mentioned. I think he is the next huge star in the sport. I think Hoka was very lucky to sort of capture him when they did. And I think he's got, a decade plus of incredible performances ahead of him. And then Annie Hughes was my Rookie of the Year too. Just, like you said, by virtue of the fact that she's so young, having, been in the sport for a little while, this was definitely sort of a year where she sort of took the next step, winning the likes of the Leadville 100, a legendary race. Having that in your resume for any athlete is amazing, but then also winning the Moab 240, among many other things. My hope for Annie is that she is getting some good direction, being so young, making sure that she is around the sport for a long time. I think she's also Hoka sponsored athlete as well. So both Adam Peterman and Annie Hughes are proving that the depth of talent on that team and the futuristic look that they have as a big presence in the sport from an athlete perspective is very evident. So Adam Peterman, Annie Hughes, unanimous rookies of the year here on the Freetrail podcast, end of year episode. Let's talk about our international ultra runners of the year. You go first.
Okay. So I kind of struggled with this a little bit. I thought men was pretty clear. Francois Dane's performance, the double hard rock UTMB was just insane. Although I think, his hard rock performance was even more impressive. And then I think when you take hard rock legs into UTMB, it's kind of insane to come out with a win like that, even on maybe an imperfect day for the men's field. But there were so many other men, like I kind of like, oh, I wonder what the data looks like here, trying to dive deeper into that. So Francois was my male international athlete of the year. And then I had a toss up. So I'm hedging my bets here for the women, between Camille Bruaz, who was second at UTMB and won Lavaredo. I didn't spend too much time, but I couldn't find more there for the season. And I was like, oh, if she had a third race, that'd be an easy one to put in there. And then Ruth Croft, I think, was the other like very phenomenal performance this year, only because Beth Pascal dropped out of UTMB. That's kind of where the shuffle happened for me. Ruth Croft won Tarawera last winter, was second at Western States, sat out of CCC at UTMB, which was a smart decision for her, and then came back and won at Le Tempier at the end of the season in a really fast time. So that was kind of the like trying to balance like how many races did they run, where were they smart, what decisions did they make, and so I'd probably tip my hat more to Ruth Croft in that regard, just you having a more well-rounded race resume for the season. And then so Ruth Croft and Francois Dane will be my male and female international ultra runner of the year.
Yeah, great. So of course, great minds think alike. So I'll just kind of add a couple of other thoughts here. I also had Ruth Croft and Beth Pascal and Camille Bruyas. I think it's going to be really interesting to follow Camille Bruyas, French runner, over the next few years. She seems to be a rising star. In fact, when you and I were doing the UTMB commentary, we got messages, I think it was from Katie Scheid, right, who sent us notes sort of tipping us off to what Camille had been doing in the European ultra scene this year. By virtue of the fact that she finished second at UTMB, she is automatically into Western States next year, and she has accepted that ticket. So Camille Bruyas is a name to remember for ultra fans out there. She will be coming stateside in the summer next year to try her hand at the great American 100-miler, that being Western States. And then on the men's side, of course, Francois, everybody knows, the best in the world right now, especially for long 100-milers. So my sort of honorable mention was Aurélien Dunod-Palaz, a really great French athlete who I think is also worthy of attention here in the next 5 years or so. I think he's still only like 29 years old, but he started his season by winning Trans Gran Canaria, of course, one of the most important races on the European circuit, finished second to the great Francois Dane at UTMB, and then finished his season with a 3rd place finish behind Killian and your teammate Dima at Ultra Pyreneo. So Aurélien Dunant-Palaz is, I think, definitely a name that we'll be hearing a lot more of here in the next few years. And he, fortunately for him, got pulled in the Hard Rock lottery. So he is also coming stateside next year. And we will all, as American ultra fans, get to witness him racing on our home turf, probably on a course that really does suit him, and facing off against the likes of Francois Dain and Kilian Jornet. So Aurélien Dunant-Palaz is my sort of honorable mention there. But again, we're on the same wavelength. So let's transition to performances of the year. I think we just kind of tick through these quickly. I can go 5 deep if you feel like it, because I think these are actually very good. And I wonder if, do you have your ballot up in front of you?
I have the top 3 up in front of me. I'd have to find my ballot.
Let's just go top 3 then.
The other thing too, honorable mention, one more international guy, in part because he races predominantly sub ultra, coming in from an OCR background, is Jonathan Albin, with his win at Les Tempiers and his OCC course record at UTMB. And there's my dog alerting us that my mother-in-law is home. So I'll release her out of the room so she's not quite so loud.
We'll hit pause.
I'm releasing Petey, but I'm recording a podcast, so I'm gonna leave it right here. Like clockwork, I knew that was going to happen. Little guard dog, she's terrible.
So Jonathan Albin, you finished your thought. I think we can jump into
performance of the year.
Performances of the year.
You want to tick off yours first? You want me to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay, performances of the year. This was an interesting part of the ballot, and one that I feel like I did okay on, but I feel like there's some, that I'm like, oh, where does that go in the top 5 type of thing? So we get to rank them 5 deep. What I did on the women's side was I put Courtney Dauwalter's UTMB course record as my performance of the year. Maybe that's showing some bias there, but I thought that was insanely impressive to have witnessed.
Bias. That is one of the best performances in history.
Beating Rory Bossia's time, which we all thought was insane to begin with. Like it was mind blowing to watch. So Courtney was my first. One record that I think most of us forgot happened. My number 2 is Des Linden's 50K road world record. It's insane. It's like 3 hours something, or maybe just under 3 hours. It was insane. 2:57 maybe. I should have more notes in front of me, but I thought Des Linden's 50K, despite being a roadie, despite being at 150K, I thought that performance really deserved a little bit of credit from the ultra community. So Des Linden's 50K world record is number 2 for me. And then I actually put Camille Herron's Javelina course record, just because the race she executed there, I thought was so insanely good. Slightly different course than the original course record, but broke that time so handedly and was so solid all day that was my 3rd place position for performance of the year on the women's side over her Desert Solstice 100-mile track record. Because I thought the Javelina stood head and shoulders as much more impressive in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Wasn't she 4th overall too at Javelina?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And the consistency.
She was only 45 minutes behind the male winner, wasn't she?
Yeah. Behind Arlen. It was a textbook execution of an ultra. That was very cool to watch, I thought.
That guy, Arlen Glick, could be one of our honorable mention rookies of the year too. I'll look forward to keeping my eye on him. He's running Western States next year too.
I think we need to keep an eye on him just because I think he hasn't gotten as much notice. I think in part the races that he's chosen to run, but he's run them insanely well. So we'll have to keep an eye on him at Western States this year. Yeah,
cool. So I'll just tick through my top 5 performances of the year on the women's side just for fun. We'll go 5 deep, and I have them up in front of me. I had Courtney Dauwalter, UTMB, historically great performance, obvious number 1 in my mind. Then I had Camille at Javelina, and then I had Des, and then I had Hillary Allen at Madeira, by virtue of the fact that it was a very deep competitive race, and Hillary led from start to finish. I thought it was a convincing victory, one deserving of attention. And then Sabrina Stanley at Hard Rock missing Diana Finkel's course record by only a couple of minutes on the Hard Rock course. Those were my top 5. Let's transition over to the men. Corinne, you go first, or do you want me?
I can go first. So I think my first one might be controversial. I think a lot of people are going to put Jim Walmsley's 100K American record as the performance of the year. But I actually thought that his I thought him three-peating at Western States was the performance of the year, because that is so insanely hard to do. It was not the best time he's ever run there. It was not the easiest Western States he's ever run there, but it was to three-peat at Western States. He got my automatic number one position. And then actually I had Zach Bevan and his Strolling Gym course record as my number two. It was, I think, the oldest course record in the data sheet that we were given. It was something like from the 80s. I thought that was an insanely impressive performance. I think it was I'm just trying to pull up the actual.
I got it here. Yeah, the old record was set in 1991
by Andy Jones Wilkins.
Not Andy Jones Wilkins, Andy Jones. Yeah, okay. Just Andy Jones. But yeah, it looks like he broke the course record by 4 minutes, 30-year-old course record for Zach Bevan, 26 years old.
So he got my number
Kentucky.
2. He got my number 2, and he had a good season. He had a great performance at JFK as well. He's someone to keep our eyes on. He was second, I think, to Adam Peterman at JFK. So we'll keep an eye on him. Obviously more of a fast road ultra guy, but that Strolling Gym record is super old. And it's not necessarily pulling the most competitive runners every single year, but it's been a long-standing record in the sport. And then actually Nick Curry with his American 24-hour record at Desert Solstice just a couple of weeks ago got my number 3 position for performance of the year.
Yeah. Great list. This Zach Bevan name is actually new to me. And I guess I didn't look at my spreadsheet thoroughly enough because he didn't make my top 5. But yeah, another interesting runner. Looks like a young guy, only 26 years old, taking down a 30-year-old course record. And as you said, finishing second at JFK to Adam Peterman. But speaking of Adam Peterman, this might be controversial. I put him down with his Speed Goat 50K victory and course record as the performance of the year for me. I admittedly am somebody who is more biased towards the longer races, 100K, 100 miler. And typically, in fact, I probably have only voted for performance of the year for 100-mile races. But I felt that Adam Peterman, being only 26 years old, coming out of nowhere and breaking a Jim Walmsley held course record at the Speed Goat 50K, a race that most every fast guy has run many times. For him to come and break that course record was, I think, very impressive. And again, I think just reiterating our point that he is a rising star, and can't wait to see what he does in the future. And I think it's just kind of remarkable that he's in the conversation here, not once, but a couple of times. I'll tick through my full top 5. But like you, I had Jim Walmsley also high. He was number 2 for me, 3-peating at Western States in crazy tough conditions. What more can you say about this champion? He is really the best of our generation for sure. And third victory at Western States was number 2 for me. Then I had Nick Curry's American record at number 3, which he just did at Desert Solstice. And Nick Curry was also in, I think, like 4th or 5th for me in my Ultra Runner of the Year voting. He had a solid year. Yeah. And then I had Adam Peterman's run at JFK, number 4 on my list. So Adam Peterman making 2 appearances in my top 5.
You're an Adam Peterman super fan.
I am. Well, dude, I mean, JFK, that race has been around for 50 years. You're in the second fastest time, only seconds behind Hayden.
Under course record. I mean, he was under Hayden's time for a while too. Like it was setting up to be like the perfect, like head to head of the previous times. It was a very good run.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, it's amazing. He's 26 years old and he's thrown down times with some of the best that we've ever seen on races that have been around forever. So well-deserved, I think. And then I had Walmsley 5 at Carbon X, his 100K road, near world record. Again, I think both these lists, the top 5 for women and men are, I mean, I wouldn't make an argument if anybody, flipped mine upside down and made it, the opposite. So I think you're sort of choosing or picking between a bunch of fantastic performances, and it's tough to really split hairs and determine which one is best. And it's all sort of part of your personal perspective, but those are my top 5. Transitioning. I think we talk about FKT of the year and then do a little bit more sort of higher level sort of news and stories of the year. But let's just touch FKTs quickly. Of course, 2020 was the year of the FKT because all the races were canceled for the most part. It gave us all an opportunity to chase personal adventures. And then with races coming back, I think we saw lower volume of FKTs chased this year. I haven't seen the data out of the fastest known time message board, but I would anticipate that their data reflected the fact that people were happy to be back to racing and maybe chasing FKTs a little bit less, at least than they were in 2020. On the men's side, I thought it was obvious. Timothy Allen Olsen, PCT champion. I was lucky to spend a day with him out on the trail. He is a friend and teammate of yours. Corrine, you're nodding and anticipating that you agree with me in that.
Yeah, 100%. I think as soon as he did that, we were like, well, that's FKT of the year, I guess, because like trying to wrap your brain around, exactly how hard that is. Long trail FKTs, particularly like, things that go beyond the 10-day or 2-week long window on a long trail, like you're dealing with the winter weather historically before you even start the attempt. You're dealing with wildfires, like the getting this thing off the ground, which was supposed to happen in 2020 and was postponed for a year due to the pandemic. Like it's insane. Like I don't think I have fully comprehended still Tim Olsen's PCT this past year, because I like you're splitting hairs trying to get that fast. And it was hands down, I think, so easy to be like FKT of the year. But that being said, the men's FKTs that got thrown down this year there were a ton of really interesting ones, a ton of really good ones. There were a bunch of international kind of like big long link ups that happened in Europe. Another one that I wanted to just like shout out as being something that I think would be like my ideal vacation was Jason Hardrath's Washington Bulgars project, which I've always read as Washington Burgers project, which is not correct. But it's the 100 highest summits in Washington state with like 400,000 feet of climbing. And he did that in, I don't know, it was like 50 days or something. So insane, in part because like some of the logistics, it's easier to get into certain peaks from Canada. I don't think they were able to do that. So I thought that was a very, very cool. Sometimes FKTs are like only known times a little bit, but I thought that, it's kind of nice to like tip your hat to something that like a project like that for like envisioning it, being creative about it, and then like executing it despite like less than ideal conditions was very, very impressive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And very well said. I think FKTs are sort of turning into the equivalent of Strava CRs now, where so many of them are so solid that it's like hard to go after any of them. And so, yeah, you're right. I think one of the great things about FKTs is the creativity, is the fact that somebody could actually dream this up and map it out and figure out the logistics and actually make an attempt at it. And for him to do it, Jason Hardrath, that is super, super inspiring. And I'm pretty sure there's a film being made about it. In fact, he and I have been talking about recording a podcast here as well. Jason Hardrath, an Oregonian, getting his respect here on the podcast. And well-deserved. And I think he holds the most overall FKTs on the FKT message board on the fastest known time website. So shout out Jason Hardrath. Who'd you have for the women? Because this was the hardest thing for me, admittedly.
So that is a really interesting lineup of FKTs. And once again, like we just mentioned, sometimes it's like, is this an FKT or is this a fast known time or an only known time? And again, like tipping hats to where hats should be tipped. Like I was, obviously inspired by Lucy's Larapinta Trail FKT. Will it ever be attempted again? I don't know the answer to that, but I thought that it was just what they were able to produce out of that and like the message they were able to share from that, I thought was really, really meaningful. But what I picked as what I think my women's FKT of the year goes to, I think it's Nika Myers on the Colorado Trail, self-supported. Generally speaking, the Colorado Trail is going to go self-supported or self-supported or supported. It's really hard to go unsupported on something quite that long. But she beat. Wow, that doesn't sound. It's not head to head. She broke what I thought was a super stout FKT set the year before by Michaela Ostier, who's kind of known for being just like a long trail badass, who also went out to the Vermont Trail this year and set a fast known time there. So I thought that Nika Myers being able to take time off of Michaela Oster's self-supported Colorado Trail attempt and bring it to within 4 hours of the supported time was very, very interesting. Obviously self-supported, you're not carrying all your gear because you can pick up gear along the way, but to be that close to the supported time is really, really stout. So,
Give some context to the trail, because the fact that it's only 4 hours is amazing. It's 500 plus miles.
500 plus miles. And so I think the women's supported time is like 9 days and 10 hours. Or 9 days and 11 hours. And Nika Meyer's time this year was 9 days and 14 hours. So out there by herself. And I think sometimes when you're on these really, really long FKTs or routes in general, having people around you, even if they can't do that much for you because you're out for so long, you've got to carry stuff still. It's a confidence booster, right? To have someone there to make sure that you're like, so that you can sleep a little bit because you're not afraid, or to help share the gear load a little bit. So to do it self-supported in such fast time, well under 10 days now, is saying something. So I think the fastest men's time on it in either direction, because you can go either direction, you can go East Collegiate versus West Collegiate, all these kind of like nuances to the Colorado Trail. I think the fastest men's time now is down around 7 days. So to be, so close to the women's supported time on it, I thought that was super impressive. And it's a long trail that I want to do at some point. So I was, blown away that time came down again.
I was just going to say, it sounds like the perfect challenge for one Corrine Malcolm to tackle eventually.
So that was very, very cool. So that is who gets my ultimate nod for FKT of the year on the women's side. That's
great. That wasn't even on my radar. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, the Colorado Trail, iconic route that goes from Denver to Durango, 500 plus miles, definitely something that I would love to do eventually, though probably in a more casual style than Corrine might tackle it in. But yeah, very cool. I'm just looking at the Colorado Trail fastest known time page right now, and it looks like Betsy Kallmeyer, Hard Rock legend, holds the supported FKT on it from way back in 2003. So Nika Meyer's was only 3.5 hours, as you mentioned, Corrine, 3.5 hours slower than Betsy Kallmeyer's time. And I think if Nika was accepting support, it's not too much of a leap to assume that she would have shattered the overall or the supported FKT on the Colorado Trail. I will look up Nika Meyer's. Very interesting. Awesome. Well, great. Well, FKT of the year is sorted out. So let's move on, Corrine, to some of the other fun things that we have on our list. I think we'll start with just kind of like the overall story of the year. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say here. I'm happy to go first if you want me to, but just kind of like the overarching sort of biggest takeaway from the year or biggest story.
I'll go first. That's fine. I can do that. It's a little bit scary. It's a very broad question. But when I was thinking about this today, kind of walking around, I was thinking, okay, like what's my biggest takeaway this year? And I think my biggest takeaway for 2021 was kind of organizations and people and race directors kind of being willing to change and to, not just accept the norm. And in particular, that comes down to trying to get more women involved in the sport. I think that the story of women in particular in trail and ultra running this past year has been one that I'm really proud to be a part of. With Western States coverage, with race directors like High Lonesome, like just allocating spots, equal spots for men and women, at least at the initial get-go. Hellbender 100 did that for this year now. Out east, the Hard Rock lottery changes to make sure that the women who put in for the lottery, that percentage of participants is represented in the race, which now has, I think, very interestingly created actually several different wait lists for that race, i.e. if a female never drops out of the race or before the race starts, a female from the never female wait list will get that spot, which I think is really cool, so that we make sure on race day we're getting as many people, particularly as many women on that start line as possible. So I was really a big fan of that being a narrative this year. So when I think of the overall story of the year, I'm like, what's the narrative that I took home this year? And it was that women are here to throw down in ultra running. And we want a seat at the table. We want a seat on the board. We want a seat. We want a place in that start list. So I think getting to be a part of that actively through different organizations, but also getting to watch race directors and organizations step up to the plate and be willing to not just shut that down and say, well, we've always done it this other way, is very cool. So I'm hoping to see more and more of that and more inclusivity in our sport, going beyond, women versus males in the sport, but non-binary and trans athletes being represented in the sport as well. I'm just thrilled that policies are being put in place to allow, as much of an equal playing field as possible to get people involved.
Beautiful. Very well said, Corrine. And everybody should go subscribe to the Trail Society podcast, where you guys talk all about this stuff. And I think it is a very important thing for the entirety of our sport to prioritize if we want this sport to be taken seriously and to thrive in this next generation. I think, Corrine, you mentioned a lot of great things that have happened this year from sort of like a policy side of things and sort of a overall ecosystem within the sport. But I think maybe you didn't emphasize enough, because again, great minds think alike. My story of the year was the performances of the women this year in the sport. So not only things like race directors making these new policies, but also 15 of the top 30 women at 15 of the top 30 finishers at Western States were women. Courtney DeWalter finished 7th overall at UTMB. Camille Herron ran an insanely fast time, finishing 4th overall at Javelina. Stephanie Case was 3rd at Tour de Glacier. Your co-host, Keely Henninger, was 4th at Lake Sonoma. I mean, there's many other examples. I mean, Ruth Croft won Tarawera outright in her home country of New Zealand. And I think there's a lot more sort of key performances that I'm forgetting. But for me, the biggest, I think, overall story of the year was just, I think just the performances of the professional women in our sport. It was incredibly inspiring. And you and I had a front row seat to the Western States performances, where on an incredibly difficult day, the women put together one of the best races, I think, for top 10 positions in Western States history. And that was probably my most memorable thing of the entire year itself.
Yeah. And it's all like that. That's a cycle that will, kind of like continue to fulfill that prophecy, right? Like, you support women, you support people in the sport, you're going to see, those return in performances. So I think that's very, very cool. To see support from all sides, right? Like, you support women in the sport, they're going to perform in the sport, and to see that continue via the media and us covering it and us being able to give equal coverage at races, fighting for that when it comes to live broadcast this year. So I think we're watching change happen on the ground, sometimes not as fast as we want it to happen, but it was a good year. It was a good year to be a lady in running.
Well, since you mentioned it, Corrine, I think the other sort of major story of the year that's worth touching on, especially between the two of us, is this advent of live streaming, of actually enhancing the race day experience of the fan. And I think credit due to Jamil Curry for sort of breaking the ice on this whole process at Black Canyon earlier in the year. He is always an innovative thinker in the space. And then, you and I having the privilege to call the action at Western States, at UTMB, at Broken Arrow. I think this is going to be the wave of the future, and definitely something that will, I think, contribute to the growth of the sport, but also contribute to people like you and I, Corrine, being able to actually show and tell people why they should care about our sport and why they should care about the athletes. And I guess just to tie things back together, I think it's been impressive when you and I have been working together. There's always been a focus, not only from us, but from the race directors and the production team, to have equal coverage of both the men's and women's races. It's not always easy, just by virtue of the fact that technology is hard and where cameras are placed and things like that. But we do our best. And I think, the women's side of the sport right now is the most exciting it's been in my history. And I look forward to continuing to watch that develop. Let's move on to the Bill Duper Spirit Award. I guess I'll set this up and then I'll go first because it sort of ties into something I just said. But the Bill Duper Spirit Award, this was an idea I had when I recorded a podcast like this with Dominic Grossman a couple of years ago, where we talked about the decade in ultra running. Corrine and I are only talking about the year in ultra running today. But Bill Duper, for those who don't know, was a ultra running super fan, lived in Leadville, Colorado, but made appearances at basically all the big races in the United States. And one time even made it to Western States 100. And Solomon made a beautiful video about him. And he really is the original super fan. And Corrine and I are just hoping to live up to his example as super fans ourselves. But Bill passed away a couple of years ago. And I actually recommended this to Ultra Running Magazine, was to incorporate a Bill Duper Spirit Award in their voting process. They haven't taken me up on it yet. So we'll go ahead and take it for ourselves. And the person that I put down was Jamil Curry, a person who I think is probably the best entrepreneur in the sport, the most innovative thinker, and not only a great race director who's built an incredible business in Arizona with Aravaipa Running. He's now branched into Colorado. It looks like they're going to be setting up race operation there. He makes great content. He's generally just a great ambassador of the sport, an employer. And yeah, like I said, the person who sort of started this whole revelation of live streaming, and always helps to make great inspirational media content for his main sponsor, Solomon, as well. So again, the Bill Duper Spirit Award is for somebody who makes an impact outside of just being a great athlete. And I thought Jamil Curry was a great candidate this year.
Yeah, I think he elevates our sport would be a great way to kind of think of Jamil, right? Like I think he makes us all strive to do a little bit better, for races to organize better, for race coverage to be better. Like, I think that it's really cool to see him very much, be responsible for pushing our sport forward, right? Like that we're like catching up, we're modernizing, I think in large part due to someone like Jamil. So my Bill Duper Spirit Award goes to Stephanie Case. Stephanie Case is obviously a phenomenal runner, but I think that her work that she does outside of the sport, for her day job and for her kind of side jobs, is something that that I aspire to, that maybe we all should aspire to. Maybe not like, becoming a human rights lawyer for the UN, but I think it's really inspiring to see what she does running, given that she is running tiny circles in very interesting places most of the year. But I think the big thing too is that her Free to Run organization, which helps women in the Middle East exercise, particularly in Iraq. So I think that's very, very, I don't know. I just that's my feel good story is Stephanie Case. And I think that she's also been, she's used her platform. There's a good ultrarunner mag or trail runner mag piece on her this year. I think after she won and was third overall at Tour de Glacier this summer, about just like her history and what she's been up to, and that she is an advocate in our sport as well, not only for women living in countries where they don't have the rights to go for a run, but also in our sports here, advocating for representation or better representation in the big races like Hard Rock and UTMB and that kind of thing. So I think that what Stephanie does outside of her own running serves many, many people that we probably don't recognize are there. So Stephanie Case gets my Bill Duper Spirit Award.
See, isn't this great? The Bill Duper Spirit Award is, these two people, Jamil and Stephanie Case, I think would make Bill Duper very proud. And I'm so happy for everything you just said about Stephanie. I was lucky to have her on the show a couple of times, and she is one of the most inspiring people in the world. I would encourage people to go back and listen to those episodes if you haven't already. Stephanie Case, a very deserving nominee for Corrine's Bill Duper Spirit Award. Yeah,
year after year after year. And same with Jamil, right? Like they've been giving back to our sport or to things adjacent to our sport for a very long time. And so overdue awards for both of them, I would say.
Great. So moving on to sort of favorite trail media, whether it's a video, a podcast, a book, anything jump out to you there that was particularly inspiring this year?
I thought video. So I have my hands in too many things, right? Like I'm podcasting, I'm writing science, I'm writing things about running. I helped Jason Coop write the second edition of his book. I'm doing live commentary with you. I'm too involved in running. And so I feel like my consumption of running related material has gone down actually this year a little bit. I'm not sure what that means.
Creating, not consuming.
Yeah, I've been creating a lot and consuming less, but I do think that videos, kind of these like vignette race stories or athlete stories, have gotten a lot better. Like I feel like that it's being elevated to things that you like beyond the super fan would want to watch. So I want to give, credit to where credit's due for the people that are doing that. And one of the ones that I've really enjoyed this year that came out was Solomon TV's long shorts video on Francois and Courtney. I just think that like the way that these videos are being put together now is so much better than they were even just a couple of years ago, as far as like the narrative and even like the narration in it too. Like it's just, I feel like they feel like we've become more professional in every aspect of the sport. And so I've been really, I have enjoyed some of the kind of like medium short, you know, the 20 to 50 minute videos, which is long shorts is like almost an hour long, have been really, really good. So I have consumed a little bit of that this year.
Again, great minds think alike. I thought long shorts was the best video made since Unbreakable back in 2011. I thought it was fantastic. You know, not only a great glimpse into our sport and the great races of Hard Rock and UTMB, but two just phenomenally great athletes. And I think you and I would both agree that Francois and Courtney are just such great public representatives for us. And they do such a good job of making them seem like the people that they are, of being humble, hardworking, interesting people who, you know, don't strive for the spotlight and don't strive for public attention, but who are instead family oriented mountain people who are just looking for a good adventure. I loved long shorts. I thought it was fantastic for those who didn't see it.
Yeah. Their character comes through, which I really like.
Exactly. And to your point, that's the important thing, right? That's the story, not just that these people are great athletes, but that they're also incredibly cool, humble human beings. And by virtue of that fact, they make it seem like anybody who can come into our sport, and eventually, whether they, you know, want to just run a half marathon, or eventually if they do want to do Hard Rock or UTMB, they make it seem like it's an approachable thing. Like it's not only for the, you know, fraction of 1% of people who are just supremely physically gifted. So long shorts was phenomenal. Really, really, enjoyed watching that. And then I also just wrote down the Golden Trail Series coverage, I think has been fantastic. I think, you know, Solomon has dominated trail running media for a long time. I think they've just been the best with visual storytelling, at least with videos and other content. And now with the Golden Trail Series, the way that they're utilizing social platforms and utilizing YouTube and doing live streams and then doing highlight videos, I think. And then also the fact that it's a shorter course racing format is, I think, really exciting. And so as we think about how the sport might develop and thinking about how people's attention spans work now and thinking about, where we might see more mass adoption of the sport, it probably is more in the sort of shorter distance stuff, at least to start with, as people get introduced to trail running. And I think the Golden Trail Series and Solomon have done a great job of highlighting that race series and the athletes that take part in it. So I had that down for trail running media as well.
Yeah. Did you watch the videos they've most recently released, like their little kind of post-series TV series?
I haven't yet, but I was talking to Tyler about it.
They're on good.
Our run the other day. Yeah.
They did a really great job with it. There's well, maybe this is like leading into the predictions piece of the puzzle here, but
let's go for it.
So I think that, you know, as you mentioned, Solomon has kind of dominated the media aspect of our sport, and some of my predictions for 2022, when I thought about this, it wasn't like, oh, this person's going to crush it, or, you know, oh, the young guns are coming for us or whatever. It was that we're in this really interesting place in our sport where we've got this kind of power struggle going on. We've got Solomon with their series. We've got, we've got Hoka with, you know, the UTMB series and like all the races that are going to be falling under that. We've got, we've got other major players in the sport who have to direct their athletes somewhere, right? Like, are the North Face athletes going to do this? Or the Adidas Terex athletes going to do this or that? What about Nike Trail? Like, I think we've got this like semi power struggle happening for who is going to be, you know, controlling or deciding what direction our sport goes in. And, you know, does that segregate it into the, like, oh, you're in this series or that series, you know, i.e. like the Spartan World Trail Series versus the UTMB World Trail Series versus the Solomon Golden Trail Series versus something that just happened in the world of gravel and off-road mountain biking is that Lifetime Fitness has been a major player in it. And they just launched what they're calling the Lifetime Grand Prix. And they selected 20 professional male athletes and 20 professional female athletes to duke it out head to head in, I think it's 5 races. I don't think it's 6. I'm pretty sure it's 5 races that are an array of gravel racing and mountain biking. And like, that's super interesting for a huge prize purse. The prize purse is like $250,000. And it's like, okay, so like, are they a player in our sport? Is this something that we see coming down the pipeline? So I'm really curious as to how these series evolve.
Lifetime owns Leadville.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's not out of the question that Lifetime couldn't figure out some way to be involved in the trail running space beyond Leadville. And so I think it's like, what is going to happen with the battle of the series? As an athlete, what do you commit to? As a brand that might not be the title brand of, UTMB or the Golden Trail Series, like what do you do with your athletes? What do you prioritize? What do you incentivize? And how do you incentivize races that might be outside of those series that are still important races? So I don't know that that's a prediction more than like a foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated by the probability of, both as an athlete myself and working closely with our team manager, trying to figure out like, what do you do? What do you prioritize? What's important? How do you decide what's going to be important this year versus next year? When looking at something like UTMB, trying to be the crown event. So,
let's riff on this for a little bit, because I think this is really fascinating. It might be illuminating to our listeners, Corrine. The way I see it is, obviously UTMB is trying to consolidate as much of the important racing as possible. And effectively, skyrunning has basically disappeared from my observation. So, and in its place, it seems like Golden Trail Series has sort of taken the dominant position in the shorter distance, mostly sub-ultra distance racing. So I think the interesting thing might be, Corrine, whether UTMB and Golden Trail Series start to compete with one another. If UTMB starts to incorporate 20 to 30K races into their portfolio as well, which I think they probably plan to do.
Given what they want their championship series to be, right? Qualifying for the 20K world championship race versus the 50K OCC world championship race. Like, they're going to have to make a play at shorter distance racing. And I think from a branding perspective, although ultra and trail running are not synonymous, when it comes to brands thinking about this, what do we think about 20Ks? Or we think about like our young athletes, our development athletes, right? That where a 50K might not be appropriate or 100K might not be appropriate. There's, the trail half to trail marathon distance where it's much easier to send, the younger, newer athletes to. And so it's like, although once again, it doesn't have to be synonymous with, trail and ultra, but I think that is, like, what do brands do versus, does UTMB and Golden Trail Series just like spark an epic battle? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I sort of think of it similar to how professional triathlon is structured now, where Ironman basically owns the middle and long distance racing. And then the ITU series owns the Olympic distance racing. And if we go back to what we were just saying about the Golden Trail Series and their media initiatives, it's really fun to consume. And it's the type of thing that somebody could sit down and watch for an hour and a half or 2 hours, right?
Which surprised both of us, right? We did the coverage for Broken Arrow and we thought it was phenomenally entertaining.
Yeah. And that's why ITU distance, Olympic distance triathlon is the distance that it is, because it can be incorporated into an Olympic broadcast, right? Mm-hmm. And so with trail running, the Golden Trail Series sort of fits that mold, right? And then the UTMB World Series, not ironically in partnership with Ironman, is sort of taking over the Ironman version of this comparison. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a winner take all thing, but I think it's a really great observation for you as part of our predictions. Just see a little bit more competition on the race and event side of things and the race series side of things. And I think it will be interesting to see where athletes prioritize their big objectives. For me, with predictions, and this sort of goes into also could fit under overall story of the year too, is the finally big brands taking notice of our sport. You know, traditionally it's been Salomon and the North Face have been the biggest brands who are very invested in trail running. But now, including your team, Corrine, Adidas is in the game. Nike Trail is finally, I have it on good authority, taking trail running seriously and investing in their athlete team. Brooks has publicly come out and said that they are going to invest equal amounts in trail athletes as they do in road athletes. An insanely cool step for a brand like Brooks to take. Saucony is out there with a trail team. And I also have heard that they're really trying to build their portfolio on the trail side as well. So I think that's a really fascinating, positive thing for our sport. Having Nike and Adi and Brooks and Saucony and these traditionally road-oriented running brands, understanding that no, trail is worth our attention. We need to make product for these athletes. We need to tell stories about what's happening in the sport and generally just invest in athletes, events, product. I think it's a really great thing. And my prediction of the year is that I have heard that there is going to be a incorporation of trail athletes into a professional racing group. So I think that we're going to start to see, you know, traditionally road and track racing clubs start to incorporate trail athletes. And if not, at least seeing brands trying to co-locate some of their athletes into sort of a training group. I think that's going to be very interesting if this ever comes to pass in our sport. I think there's only a few places you could really do it effectively. But if you co-located a bunch of athletes with a couple of coaches and a good sort of training infrastructure around them and a support system, man, it could be amazing for the sport. And I think it would also be great for a brand from a storytelling perspective.
That's super interesting because we're mostly privateers, right? Like even though we're quote unquote part of the North Face team or part of the Adidas Terex team or whatever, like you're still kind of a privateer, right? You've got your own coach, you've got your own nutrition sponsors, your own, you know, side sponsors, whatever they might be, which is more akin to like, let's say cross-country mountain biking versus road teams, right? Where all your main sponsor, your title sponsor, and all your side sponsors kind of are, everyone on the team has those same sponsors. Yep. So that'd be really interesting to see that come to play. And I could see it in Portland or Boulder or Flagstaff, where there are established teams via Nike and On and Hoka, other projects like that. You know, that would be very, very cool to see that level of professionalization within our sport. That's creative. And I do think that right now, right, as you mentioned, you know, when this comes out, you'll have made an announcement already about leaving your like longtime title sponsor. 'Tis the season. Yeah. Your news, your Instagram feeds are going to be full of this for the next couple weeks, probably, as athletes, you know, thank their previous sponsors and announce new sponsors because 'tis the season with the changing of the year. 1 year or 3 year contracts are coming up. And people have been making moves and they kind of get to reveal it now that the year will be coming to an end. You know,
it's interesting, Corrine. Maybe we should talk about this too. Just expanding on the point you just made. I feel now that trail athletes are finally getting the compensation that they deserve, that where it's sort of flipped to where the athlete sort of has more of the leverage in the contract negotiations than the brand. When I first came into the sport, it was like, please give me free shoes. Like I will be happy with that. That's how the professional quote unquote end of the sport operated. Now, when athletes' contracts come up, there are a handful of solid brands wanting to make a respectable offer to these athletes. And I think with the leverage more in the hands of the athletes, we're only going to see them to continue to be compensated better, therefore being able to devote more of their time and energy to this great sport. And I think it'll only be positive for all of us from an entertainment perspective. And I think it's also worth mentioning, Corrine, that Kilian Jornet is leaving Salomon.
Left Salomon. Dakota Jones as well.
18 years. And it seems, you know, from just the stuff that he's put online that he's going to start his own thing. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to know, is he starting his own company? Is he going somewhere else because he's got some sort of, like, is he shifting gears? Although he's in hard rock, right? Like
they said publicly that he's not leaving for another brand. So it leaves the option on the table that he's starting his own. I mean, that's just me reading the tea leaves. I have no inside information, but
yeah, nor do I. I tried.
Really fascinating.
I probed everyone I could to see if anyone to shake anything loose. I was turning all the books over.
This is like Michael Jordan stuff, It's amazing. And really, Killian's the one athlete in our sport who I think has the brand and credibility to transcend a sponsor and sort of have his own. And I'll be really interested to see what he does. And if it's consistent with his typical skill as an athlete, I'm sure it'll be a success. So really, really fascinating time in our sport, Corrine. I think we both agree that it's an incredibly exciting time to be in the sport, especially as professional pontificators like we are. Let's close out by just sort of listing some of our own personal highlights from the year and things that we're personally excited about as we move into 2022.
Like personal, what do you mean?
What's exciting you? What was sort of a highlight of the year? I can go first. So then you
go first. So I know what's going on. Yeah. I want to cheat.
So this year has been huge for me in a lot of ways, like just a fascinating, exhausting, inspiring year. Just every emotion bottled up into 365 days. But one of the great highlights for me, Corrine, was getting to do the live stream with you at Western States. It was just an absolutely magical experience. One of my favorite days of being a proud member and participant in the great sport of trail running was sitting in a chair for 20 hours and talking into a microphone. I thought it was so fun. Finally getting the opportunity to do hard rock, huge personal highlight for me. And now just feeling like, new beginnings, as you just mentioned. I just announced today that I'm going to be parting ways with my longtime main sponsor, the North Face, and going on to do some new, really fun, different, exciting things that I think are going to stretch me both as an athlete, but also intellectually, putting on a race myself now in the new year with the Gorge Waterfalls 50K and 100K, and devoting all my time and energy to sort of trying to build a cool media company here with Freetrail. So it's been an amazing year for me, a lot of personal highlights and a lot of things to look forward to in 2022. What about you?
Yeah, it was such a weird year for me. I think it's just like the pandemic continued in a little bit, just because I haven't raced since February of 2020. Just having a long-term, having a long-term injury. But I'm really excited that I've gotten to think about racing again. So I'm working on my spring schedule. If that means going to Trans-Gran Canaria or Madeira, we're kind of trying to figure that out right now. But yeah, getting to, kind of fall into doing more commentary and getting to do that, in a way professionally has been really, really cool. And I'm excited, having to sit down with you and being like, Dylan, what are we talking at this year? We need to make a schedule so that I can make a race schedule as well. So trying to balance all of the things that I have in the air while 2021 meant finishing up some huge projects. I helped Jason Coop, friend of the pod, friend of both of us.
Friend of the pod, yep.
Write the second edition of his book, which was a huge undertaking. And that has come out successfully before the end of the year. So to be published in that format has been really, really cool. So I don't know. I feel like my 2022 will start with a lot of change. We'll be moving to somewhere. We're not sure where yet, due to my husband's career as a medical student, soon to be resident. So to me, it's like 2021, it was a continuation of kind of like an odd 2020, but
you did get married this year too.
I did. Okay. I got married too. I get to call him my husband now, which is super weird. But it feels like, although I didn't get to run this year like I wanted to, I got to do a lot of really cool things. I got to be at a lot of races. I got to see my people, both, personally getting married and getting to throw a big party, in which no one got COVID. So that was huge. And get to, go to UTMB and be at Western States and be at Moab 240 and be at Broken Arrow and all these things was very, very exciting. And then I re-signed with my sponsor. So I'll be joining Adidas Terrex for another 3 years, which is really exciting to feel, safety and stability in that, while I look towards 2022 being kind of this brand new year of possibility. So it'll likely mean a move for Stephen and I. It'll likely mean, kind of an odd spring of trying to get things together, but hopefully that means racing and, getting to spend 2 weeks in Tahoe in June. It's going to be okay. 2022 is going to be okay. 2021 was more than fine. But yeah, there's a lot of cool projects coming down the pipeline that, I more than anything, I'm going to have to learn to say no to a few things so that I can say yes enthusiastically to the things that I really want to do.
Yeah. What a great lesson. And yeah, a great answer for not being prepared for it, Corrine. So I think it's beautifully well said. In a year where you've struggled with injury, you really come into your own as a media personality and, mind in the sport, being published in Jason Koop's book, doing a ton of great work with me on commentary duties, starting your own podcast, now being a well-deserving voter for Ultrarunner of the Year. So even though you weren't able to compete the way that I'm sure you wanted to, it's a highly positive year, probably in retrospect. So yeah, it's always, there's a silver lining always. So I feel like we got a lot of shit done in 2021, and there's more shit to do in 2022. Always shit to do. Well, let's leave it there with a lot of shit left to do. Corrine, thank you for joining me for yet another awesome podcast. It's always great to chat with you. I hope you stay warm up there in Washington State, and let's connect again soon. Sounds good.